how did you get started with your role as a health coach focusing on sleep and stress? What were your few steps with this? Did you take any certifications or classes? I've been talking to some health coaches, and it sounds like some health coaches might take a general health coach course and then choose to focus down. Can you just tell us a little bit more about how that came about for you?
Yes. So, um, like I had mentioned earlier, I had burnt out pretty significantly in my first nursing job. And then I started a new position and it had a bunch of health issues because of chronic stress that I
Oh,
was never addressed. And so I was at this stage where it's like, I have to do something differently. I don't want to feel like this anymore.
mhm.
This is not sustainable. And I
Yeah.
also don't want to sacrifice this career that I've worked so hard for. And I also feel that it's really not fair that either that you can't do this job and also be healthy. Like we should be able to do both. And so I
Yeah.
really started to look for some solutions. Like we got to figure out how to do this differently.
Hmm.
Um, and I realized there's a huge gap between knowledge and action for nurses. I mean, I could list 20 things that I'm supposed to be doing to take care of myself, and all nurses can, right? But it's
Yes.
the implementation. There's a huge gap there.
Uh,
Um, and we probably know more than anybody why we should take care of ourselves, right? We're
mhm.
dealing with people with diabetes and heart disease and
Yeah.
all these preventative illnesses, and we see the worst of it. Yet we still are doing all the same things they're doing that got them there.
Yep.
So I was like, why is it so hard to take care of ourselves? What is going on? So um, I think the internet is probably listening all the time. I don't want to go off and onto a tangent, but ads started to pop up on my browser for health coaching. And I was like, what is this? I never heard of it before. Um, and so I didn't have a lot of experience in health coach, like what that was. I didn't know anybody who'd done it or knew it was really a possibility. So I did some research on some basic programs and enrolled in a health coach institute. And so I got certified as a health coach and then a life coach. So a generalized health and life coach certification. And I did some extra training with them in like more transformational work and belief and identity for people. And that program was really focused on habit change, the science of habit change. How do you help people actually bridge that gap between knowing what they should do and actually doing it? And so as I started to do general coaching and get experience with that, I found that there are certain sessions that I got really excited about. And it was the stress stuff, the stress teaching of like, what's going on in our body? How do we minimize stress? And that also opened my eyes to, hey, I think this might be really what I need. And
Mhm.
then the more nurses I talked to, I was like, oh, yeah, this is a piece we're missing. And if I only taught this, we would be doing really well.
Oh, cool, cool.
That's where we need to focus. This is a huge gap. And honestly, I feel like if I teach people how to manage their stress and improve their sleep, their nutrition will be more effective. Their
Yep.
exercise routine will do better for their body. All these other things that you can get support in you'll have better results. But if you're still stressed and not sleeping well, all these other things you're invested in are not going to get the results you want, right? You'll still gain weight if you're stressed, even if you're eating perfect. So I was like, we gotta learn this stuff. So that's kind of how I ended up specializing more. It was really just from what I got really excited about and what I was passionate about and where I felt like my gifts and talents were and what voice I wanted to have in the conversation, because you can't speak to it all. You got to
Yeah.
find what excites you. And then from there, because that's what really interested me, then I went into there's the emotional side of stress management. Our emotions are part of our stress response.
Hmm.
And we don't think about that very often, but that's a really painful part. When we're really stressed and our emotions are all over the place, we're
Hmm.
snapping at people, we're angry, we end up crying in the med room for no reason and can't stop. Like that emotional dysregulation is really uncomfortable and really concerning. And I realized that's a huge part of our stress response. So I got special training in emotional regulation techniques. in
Wow.
relationship to our stress manage, like to stress and anxiety and those sort of things. So like, how do we regulate our emotions and build that emotional reserve? Which is really critical too for nurses because our job is so emotional, right? We are
Yes.
in the mess with people's emotions and our own, and we don't know how to recharge those. We just are depleting them. So I got some additional training to build that kind of component up to be able to serve people better. And then I also um, built up my understanding for sleep education for shift workers. So I did a specific program that just gave me more depth in that to be able to provide some more personalized solutions that way.
This is so cool. I had no idea that there were so many super specific programs out there to support people. Thank you so much for walking us through exactly how you built this super specific program and how evidence-based it really is. That was really cool to hear. Because I see so many amazing health coaches out there doing really unique things. And I always wonder how they get to their end place. So yeah, thank you so much. And I definitely agree with you about stress being like the overarching thing for so many things. I feel like we want to get rid of stress because stress is uncomfortable. We don't feel good when we're stressed, but what we don't really consider is that stress is like an underlying process that really affects like disease processes and how our body functions on such a deeper level. And when you can like alleviate that, it really does help overall. So kudos to you for really taking this on such a comprehensive level and for following your passion like that, and also for taking a burnout perspective and having a happy ending with that. I've had a lot of nurse entrepreneurs on here, and a lot of them have started with a burnout story. And they actually, that's how mine started too.
Yeah.
It's all started with burnout.
Yeah. I mean, I think that um, the gift in burnout is that it
Yes.
causes you to pause and to
Oh, yeah.
reevaluate and to reorganize and say, what do I want to do differently? And in for my case, like I I'm still working at the hospital 12 to 24 hours a week. So I do a per diem shift over there because I still love it. And I can still love it because of the work I do, because I know how to manage my stress, and because I know how to kind of manage my energy levels and be able to
Mhm.
say, um, what's my capacity this week for this and for that? And how do I manage that energy level in a way that prevents me from getting burnt out again? And so I also really like to work with nurses who might really want to stay at the bedside. You know, they might really, they're looking for something different because they feel stuck, but they also don't want to give up patient
Mhm.
care.
Yeah, I will say that most of the entrepreneurs I have on or that I have lined up are still at the bedside in some capacity. I think the overall theme is that they felt stuck. And
Mm-hmm.
opening their own business helped them feel less stuck and was like some sort of a creative outlet and an upward growth that they didn't quite have at their current job. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of nurses are still healers and we still want one foot in that bedside career, but we don't want both feet in a bedside career. So I think that owning your own business for a lot of the nurses that I've talked to has really allowed them to reduce their role in some way. And because that they reduce their role, they're a lot more appreciative of it instead of being like, this is the only thing I can do for the next 30 years. So here I am. So I think a lot of the time, some people get hyper focused on the success of your business is if you leave the bedside. And I've had some pretty successful conversations with or some conversations with some pretty successful business owners that are still per diem um just because they enjoy it. So that's interesting that I hear that from you too. Um so last question, what is your best advice for nurses listening out there that may want to do something similar, either become a health coach and maybe become a super focused health coach like you, but they're just not quite sure where to start. They're still at the bedside, they're listening to this, they might be burnt out. Any advice for those people?
Yes. So I honestly, because I'm a stress coach,
Hmm.
um, you need to make decisions like this from a place of rest.
Mm.
So if you are feeling stuck, if you're feeling burnt out, it's really important when you're exploring new options to do really focus on healing or decreasing your stress burden, um, as you're making those decisions, because the risk is when we are stressed, our brains don't function as well. And they don't see as many creative solutions or as many creative
Mm.
options. And they see a lot of black and white. And so often when we are trying to transition and we're really stressed out, we often just end up maybe running away and just going to something else because it's there and it's going to be better. Um, but we find that a lot of the same things are happening when we find this new thing. And the reality of stress and burnout and entrepreneurship is real. So I do also really want to say that, like, because I don't, when I'm doing work in my business, I don't clock in and out, right?
Yeah.
I don't have parameters on my time. And you can do everything in your business. And there's always more to do.
Yeah.
So you really have to have those skills of being able to decrease your stress response, figuring out how to take care of yourself, figuring out how to manage your stress, so that that transition is going to be really empowered and
Hmm.
that you're going to be able to find the creative solution that is really going to fit you. Because often when we're stressed, we see an either or. Either I do this or I do that. When we are more rested, more less stressed, we will see both and, right? I could still work and I could start by maybe teaching an art class once a week because I love art, and see how that goes. And then maybe I become an art coach or do art therapy for nurses, right? Um, but what's that first small step I can take to kind of explore this and see what I like? And then that will build energy for you too and decrease stress when you're following your passions and doing something that excites you. But it also kind of allows you to take that first step, build that, energy, and then be able to take the next step. So I really think that making sure that you are making decisions, and focusing on your stress response throughout that whole process, is really critical for making really good decisions.
Yeah, I could not agree more with that. Thank you for explaining the science-backed reason for that. That you kind of get tunnel vision and you only think in black or white scenarios. And I definitely agree with starting small. I started very small with my writing stuff. I just started writing, like I started as a reptile writer and I was just writing random blogs, but they were very, very small, short blogs. And that's just because I liked lizards and I loved researching lizards. So find something that makes you happy, because I didn't know that that was going to lead me to where I was. I was just like, I'm bored and this seems fun. I'm bored and burnt out. So let's do this for a little bit. So
Yeah.
I definitely agree with like following that passion and just starting small and just like always thinking a couple of steps ahead. Like I just had the epiphany of like, oh, if I'm writing about this, why don't I use my nursing degree to write? So like I guess seeing like that opportunity, like you said, teaching an art class and thinking about doing art therapy. I think that's the entrepreneur mindset is always like finding that market and finding opportunity in that.
Yeah. Follow
Yeah.
the fun. Follow the fun. And
Yes.
then
Yes.
also having conversations with people, that are in a spot that you might want to be someday. Just, like saying, hey, can I just chat with you about what your experience is?
Hmm.
How did you get here? What advice would you have? What are the challenges you have? How have you overcome them? Just having those conversations is really valuable because you might think that this type of work sounds really interesting. And then you talk to people who do it and you realize that's not really a fit for my personality. And then you've kind of done some great exploration and learn more about yourself without kind of having to maybe taking a leap and starting school or, shifting
Yeah.
something, really doing just having conversations. And And I think more people are really willing to share, especially nurses. Nurses are so generous. Like I think I've met so many amazing nurses that just love to talk about what they do and what that looks like.
Yeah, I think nurses are really willing to help the nursing community in particular, especially if you're trying to discover like a new niche. Nurses are really like willing to be like, "Oh, you're burnt out. Let me help you. I was burnt out too. This is what I do." Yeah, I've met amazing nurses too, especially if anyone's listening and you're not on LinkedIn. I definitely recommend hopping on LinkedIn. Amazing nursing community on there all the time. All right.